Hello and welcome to Walk to Cinema podcast. Today is going to be the first of 3 episodes with special guests. We're going to be talking about the Evil Dead trilogy by Sam Raimi with Bruce Campbell. And today we're just going to be talking about the first one, Evil Dead. So we have with us an American Werewolf in New Jersey podcast. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You could tell the people where they can listen to you or see you because you are a video podcast.
Yeah, and thanks so much for that. I apologize. I didn't extend that to you guys. I messed up. You can an American Werewolf in New Jersey. You can find us on YouTube under an American Werewolf in New Jersey. We also live stream through Facebook and LinkedIn. There's a Twitter page, Facebook page. We're also available on Spotify and Google Podcasts. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to be linking as much as possible in our descriptions. But yeah, today we have Evil Dead, the first of 3, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell as Ash. And we haven't heard from you in this episode yet. Why don't you tell us what the movie's about?
I'd say it's a classic horror movie about these college students that kind of enact an evil spirit that, kind of just messes up their lives.
Yeah, it's very important for low budget horror movie making. It's a movie that influenced a lot of people. I must say, I don't think it's the best horror movie out there. You seem to have something to say about that.
No. I appreciate what Raimi did.
Definitely.
I think when you're talking about was that 1980? I think for the Evil Dead, or 81.
Yeah, I think it's 81.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so 81. You suffered in the 70s from movies, or what I call the Exorcist hangover. Where you had a lot of movies that were trying to touch on demonic things or supernatural things, and they really sort of fell short, because I felt with The Exorcist they got it perfect the first time, and so it was almost sort of a pointless task. I won't name those movies because I don't want to sit around here, bagging movies necessarily. But I thought that this was not that. This didn't have that sort of Exorcist hangover. I thought that they were kind of breaking new ground. And like you said, they were doing it with a minimal amount of budget. But it was still, it was effective for its time, and, even for today, for various reasons, which I guess we'll get into.
They did a lot of good work with what they could. They did better makeup than movies with a lot more money than what they had, which I don't remember what they had, but it was very little. They had to actually sleep in the cabin they were shooting the film in, which I don't think would even be legal nowadays.
Maybe not.
Work condition laws, I don't know.
But yeah, I thought it's very very campy. This is the first time I've ever seen anything Evil Dead.
Okay.
So it was my very first experience at it, and there were parts of it that I thought were kind of hilarious, and I think it has to do with that kind of campy, cheesy type movie making, low budget movie making.
And I think they embraced that more in the second one, which we're gonna have, a different guest next week. But yeah, this one is funny at points. I don't know if it's intentional, but people seem to love it.
I think it's clearly what you would call a cult classic.
Yes.
And so there's a very, well, it's not exactly small, but there's a decent sized but extremely, almost rabidly loyal fan base for this trilogy, and of course for Bruce Campbell. I hadn't seen this movie probably in over 30 years. So when I saw it this afternoon, I just saw it this afternoon for the first time in quite a while, and I was like, oh my God, Bruce Campbell is so young in this. It's interesting because, he's sort of now in retrospect the focal point of the film. And you sort of realize in advance that the other characters are kind of throwaway characters. So they don't take a lot of time to invest in them. And I think previously when the idea came on for us to, do this together, I said, well, are we talking about the remake the Fede Alvarez remake, which I think they spent a little more time trying to, get you invested in those and the people that are in that. But you were like, no, the original. So I was like, okay. But despite the fact that a lot of the characters are throwaway, what they really managed to do, I thought, with the way that Raimi would shoot, using the camera. I believe the story was he used the camera along a cart on the ground, and they sort of pulled the cart, to sort of simulate the demonic, entity rolling along the ground,
the
and like
point
this
of view of the
demons.
demons.
And for its time, I remember seeing it, at that time, and being, kind of freaked out because I was a kid back then, and you're like, what the hell is this? This is all right. You stop doing that, and the way that, Raimi used sound, to sort of, project this dark, sort of voice, with this, the overtone of music, but, underneath it, there's this voice, saying something. It really was effective. As the movie progresses, and it's only like a 90-minute movie, it does sort of go over the top. And like you were saying, it sort of delves into comedy, and you're just like, oh God, what is happening here? But it does grab you. The characters don't grab you, but the way that Raimi shoots the film, or it grabbed me. In the beginning, you're like, oh, this is still kind of interesting. You can see what he's doing. It's not to be sneezed at. You don't dismiss this movie, out of hand necessarily.
Yeah, I was always I was captivated by it when I was watching it. I just always thought it was kind of funny that sometimes the things like Bruce Campbell's character has his girlfriend and his sister and his like buddies from college, and they all kind of, slowly one by one die or get, possessed by the demons, and he's just kind of nonchalant about everything. Like there's not a lot of
it's terrible acting. It's terrible acting. And I think if you would probably have asked Bruce Campbell or Raimi at the time, if they knew that they had this thing that was going to extend for the next 4 decades, they probably have said no way in hell. It looked like something that like a today it would be like a student film. That's kind of what it looks like. Kids on campus, are shooting this film out in the woods or something like that. And but you could see where movies like where like the Blair Witch Project came from. Clearly rooted in this sort of setting. This nobody gets out alive kind of thing in the woods.
Yeah.
Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi were high school buddies, so I guess it's kind of their student film that made it big. They were just working together with no budget. They were friends for a long time. So, zero character development. Didn't worry about it. Zero. I mean, the acting's fine for what it is, I guess. But we're really there for what they managed to do with such a low budget and how innovative it was, the shots and the use of sound. And it was really gory for the 80s.
Yeah.
It got an NC-17, which no one gets an NC-17. So people were not into it at the time. Well, they were, but not the government, I guess, or whoever rates these.
I mean, it's quite gory. And you can see where, as I was watching it, I'm trying to think about what the strength of the movie is, because it's not the acting. It's not the investment in the characters or anything like that, but I think that like you said, the use of sound, the visuals, there's a sensory overload that kind of occurs after a while, and you're like, oh, this is too much. It gets, there's so much happening at the same time, and the recording levels, and with the demons cackling, and multiple attacks happening at once, you're like, wow, this is it reminded me of the last 15 minutes of the House of a Thousand Corpses. If you saw that, the Rob Zombie flick, that last 15 minutes is just sonic overload, sonic and visual overload. And I'm like, this whole the last 45 minutes of the whole movie is like that, and it keeps going up and up and up, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, how far is Raimi going to take it here?
I think people watching it now may not know how important this was. No, there was nothing like this available. With the makeup and how much blood they would use, and there's probably someone that knows how much blood they used throughout the filming of this. It's an immense amount. They were always drenched in it.
I remember thinking, like, I wonder if someone's done like the math on if the amount of blood each person loses is accurate to how much the human body actually has.
You can't be.
Every human seemed to have about 4 times the normal amount of blood in them in this movie. I think that Raimi, and especially with younger audiences, Raimi might not be even known for this. They know him for Spider-Man. And maybe they know, because we had covered about a month ago, Drag Me to Hell. Which is another Raimi, horror flick. He had returned to horror, and then I think he was closely involved with the remake of this movie. But not that many people modern horror. Oh, I guess they do. I guess maybe I'm not correct about that, because when I see a lot of content creators, there's a heavy focus on the 80s, and so having unfortunately grown up through the 80s, I remember a lot of those movies, and they were sort of formulaic in the sense that you had these characters. There were just so many B horror movies out there. They just littered the streets. You could pick them up like you would find pennies on the ground or something like that. And they all had these sorts of throwaway characters with the over-the-top violence. There'd be a gratuitous nudity scene or sex scene or something like that. I mean, you could probably write one on the back of your science notebook in school or something like that. But this was among the first.
Yep.
And it was, for its own reasons, it still holds up.
Yeah. But you mentioned the gratuitous nudity, and there's the scene in this movie that's even the big fans of this, I've heard a lot of people hate on it, where the tree kind of rapes the girl, which seems to be out of nowhere and make no sense why you needed to be on it. And I think even Sam at this point regrets filming it.
I wouldn't know about. I mean, I hadn't done a research for this film. It's a scare. It adds to the scare, because again, this is, although it's it's shock value. Shock value is what sort of grabs you, and you're like, oh, what's happening here? Raimi's kind of going for it here. This is, I've never seen anything like this before. They depicted it again in the remake. I mean, they didn't shy away from it. That movie was perhaps even more. It was even more graphic than this one, in a much more sort of in a less over the top kind of way. But I think, again, Raimi breaking ground. Sometimes he's just, going for it with something that's just super graphic. And here we are 40 years later still talking about it. So, it's not to be sneezed at.
Yeah, I think it's probably the thing that kind of makes you pay attention, like, oh, this is this kind of demon. Like, they're not messing around. This is now going to be.
They control everything, including nature.
Yeah.
Which, there's no escape for the characters within the confines of the first film.
Yeah. And just the way that it's so grainy. Which, I don't know if that's due to low budget or, Raimi was doing this deliberately. I mean, clearly there are tons of movies that have been released, in the 70s that didn't have that grainy sort of feel. It does look like, almost a found footage, kind of thing. You can see the precursor for other types of movies, that came after it, that sort of way. in no way, shape, or form is this like the greatest movie of all time or anything like that.
No, it's not.
But it is something that I think every horror fan should see at least once.
Definitely.
And if you find yourself in that sort of rabid cult, group, then, God bless you. You think that this is great. I was talking to a friend of mine. We did a top 10 list about 2 months ago with me and a regular group of people on the panel. And this was, I think, my one buddy Bill's number 3. And after I saw it, and Bill and I have known each other since, like the late 80s, 87 or something like that. And after I watched it, I messaged him. I'm like, you and I need to have a serious talk about this movie. I'm like, I just saw this for the first time since, you and I probably met in college. I'm like, what the hell, are you, trying to push here? So I think what's going to happen is that he and I are going to do like a compare and contrast episode, maybe in January or something like that, where we do the original and then the remake, within the same episode or something like that. But again, I enjoyed this more than I enjoyed The Omen. I enjoyed this more than I enjoyed the Amityville Horror. Because those just seemed like, sort of blatant. I mean, even though the Amityville Horror is based on what is supposed, a true story about the DeFeo murders and all this sorts of thing, and it was a big blockbuster book, it still had that Exorcist hangover feeling. There was none of that here. It was fresh, and it was kind of subversive. It was new. And, again, does it feel like a college student's movie? Yeah, it does. Did it grab me at least for the first half before, like for me personally, the sensory overload got to be too much? But I can see why it's still ranked up there as one of the top horror movies of all time, and why I think it was his number 3.
Yeah, I don't think it's only for horror fans either that should watch this. I think if you're going to make movies or be a part of movie making in any way, this is a good example of what you can achieve. And that you said it, they clearly weren't expecting this to be this hit that lasts for 40-50 years, and people are still talking about it and making new content about it, making remakes, making TV shows.
Yeah.
Ended up being pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, he was just there on he had a series there for a while, wasn't he? He was back. Playing Ash once again, so yeah, I mean, for aspiring filmmakers, I mean, whatever your ideas are, and I'm not an aspiring filmmaker or anything like that, but I mean, whatever your ideas are, why wouldn't you go for it? What have you got to lose? I mean, at the very least, you're going to create it, which is kind of the point, whether, I mean, if it's coming from inside you, then it's already authentic, whether you make $1 million is another matter entirely, which is where we're getting all the, the retreads and the reboots and the remakes and the, that kind of thing. I feel like, the market's sort of flooded with those sorts of things. So it's hard to get the original ideas out, but every once in a while, you get a subversive flick like this out there, and, it stays with you.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I wasn't sure I was going to, because I personally am not that big of a horror fan. He's more of the horror fan than I am.
Okay.
I force you to watch every horror movie we review.
You're just you're along for the ride. Okay. Yes, all right. The tables may turn, and you may turn into the hardcore horror fan. Who knows? After time, you may find something. He's like, I'm not watching that, and then
I think she thinks she likes it less than she does, because you ended up always liking, or at least enjoying, the ones we watch. You never hate them, so I think it's in your head that you hate horror movies.
It's not that I hate horror.
Not
movies.
Hate. That's a strong word.
You
don't gravitate towards it.
Yeah. I don't think they're ever going to be my favorite movie. Like, I don't think a horror movie is ever going to be my favorite movie, but who knows? Maybe there'll be one.
Within, the thing is that, within, and we were just talking about this with the other movie, within every genre, you can find good movies.
Yeah.
Whether it's rom-com or if you were like, I'm not a rom-com fan, but if you were to go to my Blu-ray collection, I probably have 1 or 2 in there that like
Yeah.
I've enjoyed over. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good fucking movie. You know, fuck, you know, I wouldn't mind owning it. Oh, it's $4 used over a Books A Million. All right, I'll buy that. You know, I'll probably never watch it. You know, I'll watch it like once every 5 years or something like that. But it's in there. You know, westerns or sci-fi or action or drama or thrillers. You know, within all of these, you know, there's, you know, those movies that sort of, you know, are right up there at the top. And you know, and that's what I was talking about earlier. You know, in terms of intelligent movies. You can have horror films, you know, that are intelligent horror films, or, you know, intelligent rom-coms or things like that. And then, you know, it's in my mind, it sort of works like a pyramid. You know, as you move down, you know, the base sort of widens out. And like I said, that there are so many movies from the '80s that were just god awful and have been largely forgotten about in terms of the horror genre. But you know, you get the ones that sort of gravitate and move up, and you know. That's what we're talking about now. I mean,
Yeah.
So
Genre films are always tricky. People always associate genres with something they don't like when maybe they're starting to get into films, or maybe they just don't like something. You don't like westerns, for example.
Yeah.
I force you to watch John Wayne or Roy Rogers, and you get mad.
Roy Rogers, oh Lord. Roy Rogers, you're pushing the envelope there. With
Yeah,
that
Roy
one. Jesus,
Rogers
even
is
by
really-
my standard, Roy Rogers, really?
Yeah.
All right, you know, I could see like The Searchers or Rio Bravo or something, but Roy Rogers, good grief.
Those are the
Um,
B movies from the 50s.
Yeah,
cheap
yeah,
westerns,
Roy
yeah.
Rogers, good grief. My buddy's mother used to watch that. Instead of oldies, he used to call them moldies. He's watching another moldy, eh? Okay.
They're not good,
No.
but
No,
they
no,
entertain
they're
you
not
for an
good.
hour, 55 minutes. They're so short.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
they're like
short.
television episodes or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, I mean, you know, there so many of those movies have been forgotten about, but you know, you also get the occasional one like this, you know, that stands the test of time. So yeah,
Yeah.
you know, well, now for me, you know, by the time this got to be about 60 minutes in, the overload got to be, you know, and so I started to sort of pull back.
Yeah.
You know,
I
because
kind of
it
felt
just
that
started
too.
getting, it started to get too shrill.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, you know, he's kind of losing me here. You know, like we're about 45 minutes in, it started to, you know, I was like, okay. And then it sort of ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. And I think that's where, you know, the crowd sort of divides, and, you know, whether you're part of that cult, you know, whether you're either me or my buddy Bill, you know,
Yeah,
like,
the
you know,
huge
we've known
fans
each
of
other
the
for
movie.
forever. Yeah,
The
but
huge
like,
fans of this love how crazy it gets, and they love how crazier the sequels get. And I kind of do personally. I like the sequels more than the original. But I
my-
guess I'll talk about it in the sequel episodes.
Well, my favorite is the remake, the Fetty.
Oh.
That was much more intense. It was much more
It's
graphic.
more serious.
It was scary. Yeah, that was a scary
Yep.
movie. I was living in Indonesia at the time, and I remember going to the movie theaters, and I went by myself because you know, it's hard to find horror fans over in Indonesia who want to go see hey, do you want to go see the Evil Dead? You know, like what? You know, it's a predominantly Muslim country, so yeah, there's not a huge audience for the Evil Dead, but it was playing over there, and I went to go see it. And have you guys seen that? Have you seen the remake?
The remake, no.
Okay,
But I've seen a lot of reviews for it when it came
Gotta
out,
see-
and
Gotta see the remake. Gotta see the remake. I would strongly recommend it.
no.
And I remember the lights came on, and I was kind of chuckling because, you know, I've been watching horror movies since I was a little kid. You know, my mom started me with the old Bela Lugosi movies and,
Mhm.
you know, Boris Karloff. And then she started me with the Hammer films of like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and these sorts of things. And then I branch off in my own direction. So I'm sort of chuckling because I've been watching these my whole life. And I turn around and I look across the aisle because I had an aisle seat. And there's this guy there with his girlfriend, and he's hiding behind his girlfriend, like in the seat, like you know, it would be like he ducked behind you, behind the camera, and he's like trying not to look. And I just busted out laughing. That was a seriously scary movie.
Yeah.
They ramped it up in all of the ways that you know, Raimi's version was campy. This was not. It had a much more serious tone to it. And that's the one copy that I actually own on Blu-ray. The other ones I don't own. I just happen to they're available on HBO this month. So
Those are the ones we do own. We don't have the remake.
yeah.
But you lived in Indonesia, so you know better than me. But I've seen a couple Indonesian horror movies that were actually pretty good and scary. Shadow Originals, mostly they make a lot of them.
I'm trying to think. I don't recall that I saw a lot of local movies. The best, because they were all see if the language there is called Bahasa, and so what happens is if you go to see a local movie, they don't have English subtitles. So it's like when if you're living in
That's
India,
true.
they're all in Hindi. So like if you go see a Bollywood movie, you really don't need subtitles. They're so formulaic, it's like, okay, you guys, it's all going to work out, and this guy's going to do what his parents want him to do, and it's still going to work out, somehow. And, it's really easy. And in between that, they're going to dance a lot.
Yeah.
But I remember the only movie that I really saw over there was the one called, oh God, what was the name of that movie? The one where the police stormed the tenement building.
The Raid.
It's like
The Raid.
The Raid.
Yeah, we've seen that one.
I saw The Raid in the theaters in Jakarta. I was in a mall in Jakarta, and I went to see this movie called The Raid. And you didn't need any subtitles for that
so
movie,
good.
obviously. It was like one of the best movies I ever saw. And I thought later that when they did that reboot of Dredd. Did you see the one with Carl Urban where he plays
I didn't
Judge
see
Dredd?
it, but
You got to see it. It's very familiar in terms of The Raid, about two judges get locked down in this building, and the whole building sort of turns on them. But of course, it's Judge Dredd, so they don't stand a damn chance. So which is fine. You want to see Judge Dredd kick some ass. But I remember going to see The Raid, and I'm like, this is the greatest fucking movie I've ever seen. Holy shit! Like people are flying and bullets are flying and kicks are flying and knives are flying, and it was great. It was one of the few times that I went to see a local movie in the theater, and I was lucky I got it 100% on that one, so that was cool.
Yeah, the fight choreography on that one's pretty.
It's an amazing movie. People love the sequel. I like the sequel a little bit less, but
yeah, same here. Someone tried to show that to me, and it didn't hold my interest the same way. But that first one was just a banger, man. Holy crap. What a great movie.
Yeah, but Evil Dead, on our podcast, we rate the movies. I don't know if you want to rate it. If you don't, that's okay too.
Yeah, sure.
I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's iconic. It's something you should see. I don't love it, but I like watching it every so often, couple years. What did you give it?
I gave it a 6 out of 10 because I liked it a little bit less, but it's still enjoyable enough for me to like have a good time and not dread sitting there. But there were a couple things that I was annoyed by, like Linda's giggling, the crazy giggling.
I can excuse that one. That one's pretty bad.
Like that one's just kind of annoying after the first couple seconds.
Yeah. If you're asking me, I'd probably go 5.5.
Okay.
I again, this is not a movie where I'm saying avoid it. Just the opposite. I'm saying, if you're a horror fan, that this is mandatory. It's mandatory that you see The Evil Dead because so many other movies are, predicated on it, and that sort of cabin in the woods, kind of feel, and the found footage kind of feel, and breaking free of that, exorcist hangover. Again, but what happened in the second half of the movie, it ramped up too much. What I do when I do a show is, as I'm watching it, I'll take some notes, and then I'll transfer them over to a Google Doc on my phone, which I post right in front of the camera here. And that's my last note. This is too much. that was the last note I got here. I said 60 minutes in, and then there's like a ellipse with the 3 dots. So 60 minutes in, like I was looking at my phone, like, okay, how much time do we got here? And then my last note with the last thing I wrote about this movie, this is too much. Now that places me in the minority, because most people consider this one of the the best horror movies of all time, and I understand for its time it's just it was a bit too much for me. So I'd give it 5.5, but a mandatory 5.5. Go see that 5.5. It's on HBO right now, HBO Max if you have it. So if anybody's if you check this, it's available to you if you don't want to spend money necessarily.
Yeah, so I guess that's all from us for this episode. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, and do the same thing for An American Werewolf in New Jersey. We're going to see you next week with Evil Dead 2.